Everyone around you seems to be further along than you. And I don't mean that in a dramatic way. Just that quiet background feeling. Someone your age just got promoted. Someone younger just launched something. Someone you went to school with posted something about their life, and it looked so assembled. Like they figured something out that you haven't figured out yet. And somewhere in the back of your head, a clock is running. I don't know when that clock started for me. I think it was just always there. This ambient sense that life has a schedule and I'm somewhere behind on it. Like there's a version of my life that was supposed to be happening by now, and this current version is a delayed draft of it. And the strange thing is, nobody gave me the schedule. Nobody handed me a document that said by this age you should have this, by this point you should be here. It just kind of assembled itself from what I saw around me, from what the internet showed me, from 100 small signals that added up to this invisible timeline I'm apparently running behind on. And once that timeline exists in your head, it's really hard to stop measuring yourself against it. There's this specific kind of anxiety that lives in the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. It's not quite sadness. It's not quite stress. It's more like this low grade restlessness that makes it hard to actually enjoy what's happening right now, because what's happening right now is evidence of where you haven't gotten yet. Maybe you've noticed this too. You do something, finish something, make something, build something, and instead of feeling good about it, your brain immediately goes okay, but that should have happened sooner. Like the accomplishment gets discounted because of when it arrived, which is a weird way to live if you actually think about it. Nothing counts because everything is late. I think comparison is doing a lot of work here that nobody really examines. Like, we know comparison is bad. Everyone says it. Don't compare yourself to others. And we nod. And then we open our phones and do it immediately and compulsively for the next hour. But the part that doesn't get talked about as much is that comparison doesn't just make you feel bad. It also distorts your sense of time. When you see someone else's highlight, their launch, their announcement, their life looking put together, you're not seeing their timeline. You're seeing one frame from it. You don't see the 3 years before that where nothing was happening. You don't see the version of them that felt exactly as behind as you feel right now. You just see the frame, and you compare your entire unedited experience to someone else's one good frame. And obviously you lose that comparison every time, because it's not a fair comparison. There's a thing that happens with late bloomers, people who found their thing later than expected, where they often end up being really good at it, not despite being late, sometimes partly because of it. I don't know if that's always true. I don't want to turn it into a cliche, but I do think there's something real in the idea that arriving somewhere after a longer path sometimes means you arrive with more patience, more perspective, more actual understanding of why you want to be there. The person who figures out what they want at 35 has had 35 years of living that the person who figured it out at 22 doesn't have yet. And that's not nothing. That context goes somewhere. But here's what I actually think is underneath all of this. The anxiety about being behind isn't really about time. It's about legitimacy. Like, what the behind feeling is actually saying, if you translate it, is I'm not sure I'm allowed to have the life I want. Because if I were allowed, it would have happened by now. The fact that it hasn't is evidence that maybe it's not for me. Maybe I missed the window. Maybe the window was only open for a certain kind of person, and I wasn't that person. And that's a much scarier thought than I'm running behind schedule. That one's just logistics. The other one is about whether you're worthy of the thing at all. I've been kind of wandering around this world while thinking about this, and I keep noticing. In Minecraft, there's no wrong way to play. Like, genuinely. You can spend 100 hours building something elaborate and never go to the end. You can speedrun it. You can start over 20 times. Nobody's tracking your progress against some standard playthrough. There's no cutoff where the game decides you took too long and closes on you. And I know that's just a game. I know real life has actual constraints that Minecraft doesn't. But I think there's something in there about how much of the timeline pressure we feel is internally constructed versus actually real. Most deadlines for life milestones aren't deadlines. They're just averages. Averages that got treated like rules somewhere along the way. And the thing about averages is they describe the middle of a distribution. They don't describe what's possible. They don't describe what's good. They just describe what most people do, which is shaped by 1,000 factors that have nothing to do with what's right for you specifically. But we treat them like norms, and norms feel like requirements, and requirements feel like timelines you're on or behind. And once you're behind, in that framing, the natural response is to rush to cut corners, to skip steps because you're trying to make up time that wasn't actually lost. And rushing is how you end up somewhere faster, but less prepared, less grounded, less sure of why you're even there. There's this thing I think about sometimes, the idea of being early instead of late. Like, what if the framing is just wrong? What if you're not behind a schedule that already happened, but early to a version of your life that hasn't arrived yet? I know that sounds like a reframe, and it kind of is. But the thing about reframes is that they matter. The story you tell about your position changes what you do with it. Someone who thinks they're behind tends to panic, rush, or give up. Someone who thinks they're early tends to prepare, stay patient, keep building. Same position, different relationship to it, different outcomes. Actually, I'm not sure I said that right. What I mean is there's a difference between patience and avoidance. Patience is continuing to build while accepting that it'll take time. Avoidance is using "I'm not behind" as a reason to not start. And I think sometimes we confuse them. I know I have. Telling myself I'm fine, I have time, it'll happen, when what was actually happening was I was scared and not moving. And the "I'm not behind" story was just covering for that. So I don't want this to be something people use to feel okay about standing still. That's not the thing. The thing is more like, stop letting other people's timelines define what counts as progress for you. Someone launching their thing at 24 and you launching yours at 31. Those aren't comparable events. They're different stories, different resources, different starts, different definitions of what the thing even is. Treating them like they're the same race where one person finished first is just not how any of this works. Your timeline is only legible from inside your own life. And when you're inside it, it often looks slow and messy and unclear. Everyone else's looks clean from the outside because you're only seeing it from the outside. There's something kind of relieving about accepting that nobody actually knows what they're doing as much as they look like they do. Not in a cynical way, just in a everyone is figuring it out as they go, and the people who look most figured out are usually just better at looking figured out. Or they figured out one part and the other parts are still messy. Or they're happy in ways that wouldn't make you happy and unhappy in ways that never make it online. Bro, the curated version of a life is such a small slice of the actual life, and we know this, but knowing it and feeling it are different things. I think what actually helps, more than reframing, more than philosophy, is just having something you're working on, something you're actually inside of. Because when you're inside something, really building it, learning it, working on it, the comparison stuff gets quieter, not gone, but quieter, because you're oriented towards something instead of toward other people's progress, and your timeline becomes the work's timeline instead of some abstract social one. The problem mostly happens in the gaps. When you're not sure what you're building, when you're in between things, when you're searching, those are the moments where the behind feeling gets loudest because there's nothing else to focus on. And maybe that's just part of it. The between times are uncomfortable. They're supposed to be, maybe. Not because discomfort is good on its own. It's not. But because the discomfort is the gap between where you are and where you're going. And that gap is real. You don't resolve it by feeling fine about it. You resolve it by slowly closing it, which takes time and looks messy from the inside and won't look like anything to anyone watching until it does. I don't know. I keep coming back to this idea that the people who do interesting things with their lives are usually the the people who stayed on their own path long enough for it to become something. Not because they were especially disciplined or especially talented, just because they didn't quit when it was taking longer than they thought it should. And that's actually most of it, right? Most of what separates someone who built a thing from someone who didn't is just the accumulation of not stopping when it felt too slow, which is kind of unglamorous and kind of hopeful. Anyway, that's where I keep landing with this. Not some big insight, just the quiet reminder that the timeline in your head, the one that's telling you you're late, you're behind, you missed something, that timeline was never real. It was assembled from other people's highlights and turned into a rule without anyone's permission. And you can just not follow it, not recklessly, not as an excuse, but just stop letting it be the thing that measures you. You're not late to your own life. There's no late. There's just where you are and what you do from here. Hold that thought for a second.